Imagine an entire continent simply breaking apart into two pieces. That sounds like the beginning of a disaster movie, but that is exactly what is happening with Africa right now. In this video, we will look at why the second largest continent on Earth is breaking apart and what new continents could then emerge. So make sure to stay until the end. Welcome, everyone. I bless the rains down in Africa. Sorry for the singing interlude, but while preparing for this video, I had a catchy tune from Africa by Toto stuck in my head the whole time. I promise I will never sing again. Once you have subscribed to the channel, subscribing is absolutely free, you will never miss a video again, and you will be helping me and the channel immensely. Thank you very much, guys. So let's go to Africa. While many people think that continents are just rigid landmasses, Africa shows us that this is not the case. Let's take a closer look at this incredible story. First of all, we have to realize that the Earth beneath our feet is constantly moving. The continents we stand on are basically nothing more than thin tectonic plates floating on a sphere of hot rock bumping into each other. A bit like the cool kids back then in the schoolyard. Only no one fell apart back then. At most, a yogurt would burst in the backpack. Over geological periods of millions of years, these plates slide past each other, tear apart or collide in extreme slow motion. Mountain ranges are created and oceans become wider. Normally, these processes are imperceptible to us. The movements are only a few millimeters or centimeters per year. But sometimes something happens that reminds us of how turbulent it is inside our planet. And that is exactly the case in Africa. In March 2018, a huge crack opened up in the ground in southwestern Kenya. This fissure, which appeared after heavy rains, was several kilometers long and even swallowed up part of the Nairobi-Narok highway. Imagine driving comfortably on the highway and suddenly a huge crack opens up in front of you. Sounds like it's straight out of a Michael Bay film, but it really happened. This dramatic rift is located in the Kenyan Rift and is part of a region called the East African Rift System, or Great African Rift Valley. And this rift system is truly impressive, stretching an incredible 3,500 kilometers from the Red Sea in the north to Mozambique in the southeast of the African continent. For comparison, that is approximately as long as the distance from Madrid to Moscow. But what exactly is this rift system? Essentially, it is a vast network of valleys that began to form 35 million years ago. It consists of two parallel rows of fractures in the Earth's crust. The eastern branch runs through Ethiopia and Kenya, while the western branch extends from Uganda to Malawi. And the most fascinating thing about it is that this rift system is a sign that Africa is slowly splitting into two parts. For a long time, scientists thought that Africa was sitting on a single tectonic plate, but since the 1970s, evidence has been mounting that the African plate is splitting into two new plates along the East African Rift, the Nubian and Somali plates. And this is happening as surely as Mount Kilimanjaro rises like Mount Olympus above the Serengeti. I can't get rid of this catchy tune today. Now you might be wondering, how quickly does this happen? Well, GPS measurements show that the Nubian plate and the Somali plate are moving apart at an average speed of 7 millimeters per year. It doesn't sound like much at first, but over geological time periods it adds up. In a few million years, the crack could be so wide that seawater could penetrate and form a new ocean. Where there is still savanna and desert today, there could be an ocean in the distant future. Countries like Uganda and Zambia, which today have no access to the sea, could suddenly become coastal states, and the entire Horn of Africa, i.e. countries like Somalia, Eritrea, and parts of Ethiopia, could split off from the rest of the continent and become a huge island. But why does this happen at all? The leading theory states that heat waves in the mantle influence the lithosphere, the Earth's crust and solid upper mantle under Kenya and Ethiopia, causing it to heat up and expand. This thinning of the lithosphere has led to massive volcanic eruptions in the brittle continental crust, breaking into a series of faults. Viewed from above, these faults look like deep crevices and elongated basins separated from each other by higher ground. One of the most well-known examples of volcanic activity is Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. Kilimanjaro, which many of you may know as a snow-capped peak, is actually a volcano formed by this tectonic process. But what does all this mean for the people who live in the region? For one thing, the seismic and volcanic activity along the rift causes earthquakes and eruptions. It can, of course, be dangerous for the population living nearby, but the rift also offers many advantages. The volcanic activity has created fertile soil, and the lakes there are important sources of water. Interestingly, the development of the East African rift system has also played an important role in human evolution. Many important fossil finds of early human species have been made in this region. Some scientists even suspect that this constantly changing landscape of the Rift Valley may have driven the evolution of humans by forcing our ancestors to constantly adapt to new environments. So basically, you owe your presence here to the tectonics beneath East Africa. That's reason enough to say thank you. Everyone should write "Thank you, East African Rift System" in the comments. But back to the dramatic rift that has opened up in Kenya. What happened? After a thorough investigation, geologists concluded that it was probably an existing fissure that had remained undetected because it was filled with volcanic ash from past eruptions. During the heavy rains, the deep layer of soaked ash then collapsed and the fissure was suddenly exposed. It can be that simple sometimes. And that shows us how complex and dynamic the geological processes beneath our feet are. What appears at first glance to be a sudden dramatic change is often the result of processes have been going on for millions of years. But then, in the truest sense of the word, a drop causes the tectonic barrel to overflow. What does this mean for Africa's future? If the trend continues, a new ocean could actually form in the distant future. This would dramatically change the geography of the continent. Imagine you could sail by boat from Kenya to Ethiopia, which is just something you do on a Sunday afternoon. Feel free to write in the comments. But take your time, because we need to think in geological timeframes here. This process will stretch over millions of years. None of us will likely witness the end of the process. Even if you have yourself frozen, it is unlikely that your cryoservice provider will operate economically for that long, especially not at the location Germany. He will probably go bankrupt before that, and you will have to be forcibly thawed. But anyway, I digress. It is certainly fascinating to know that we are witnessing the beginning of such a monumental change, even if we do not live to see the end. And it is also interesting to realize that this process is not happening evenly everywhere. In some areas of the rift, the plates are moving apart faster than in others. There are also areas where the process seems to have come to a complete stop. The eastern branch of the rift, for example, is considered a failed rift, while the western branch is still active. This reminds us that geological processes do not always proceed in a straight line. Sometimes a rift begins to open up only to then come to a halt. A well-known example of this is the mid-continent rift in North America, which began to open up 1 billion years ago but then stopped. But even if the process in Africa does not lead to a complete division of the continent, the geological changes that we can observe are super fascinating. For they give us insight into these immense forces that have shaped our planet and continue to do so. And who knows, perhaps we are truly witnessing the beginning of the formation of a new ocean. Wouldn't be the first time in the history of the Earth. The Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden are examples of similar rifts at more advanced stages of development. Millions of years ago, they began to open up in a similar way to the East African rift today. I will, of course, keep you updated on all future research findings on this topic. And when Africa has completely broken apart in a few million years, I will, of course, do a live stream for you. So subscribe to the channel now. And now we travel from Earth into space, to Jupiter to be precise. It's not only impressive because it's the fattest planet, it also hides many other fascinating secrets, and now NASA has discovered something incredible deep inside Jupiter beneath its mighty storms. You can see the original footage in the video shown. Be sure to click on the top right and travel with me to Jupiter. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to check out the older exciting videos too. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. I'm going to go listen to Toto for a bit. Take care, friends.